You need to hear every word I'm about to say. Because what happened to me at Fort Campbell last September, it changed everything I thought I knew about my job, about this base, and about what's actually out there in those restricted zones they never talk about. I'm a rifleman, 26 years old, 6 years in service. I've been trained to handle threats most people only see in movies. But that night on patrol, my training meant absolutely nothing. The thing is, they brief us on enemy combatants, they drill us on vehicle recognition, aircraft identification, wildlife encounters. But there's no manual for what I saw, no protocol, no radio code. Just silence from command when I try to report it. My hands are still shaking as I record this. Not from fear, well, not just from fear, but from anger. Because I know what I witnessed, and I know I'm not the only one. There are others on this base who've seen things that get buried under paperwork and reassignments and medical discharges labeled as stress-related incidents. But I'm done staying quiet. So right now, before I lose my nerve, hit that subscribe button. Turn on your notifications, because what I'm about to walk you through is going to sound impossible, and you're going to want to come back for every single part of this testimony. This is my story. This is what they don't want you to know about Fort Campbell, and this is why I can't sleep anymore. Let's begin. Fort Campbell sits on the border between Kentucky and Tennessee, over 100,000 acres of land, home to the 101 Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. If you know anything about military history, you know that name means something. These are the paratroopers who dropped into Normandy on D-Day, the soldiers who held Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. This isn't some National Guard weekend warrior base. This is where elite infantry soldiers train for real combat. I arrived here in 2019, fresh out of advanced individual training, young, motivated, ready to prove myself. The base is massive, bigger than most people realize. We've got ranges, training facilities, aircraft hangars, barracks that house thousands of soldiers. On any given day, you'll hear the constant thump of helicopters overhead, the crack of rifle fire from the ranges, the rumble of Humvees and tanks moving through the training areas. It's loud, it's busy, it's exactly what you'd expect from one of the most important Army installations in the country. But here's what most people don't know. There are sections of Fort Campbell that regular personnel never see. Areas marked on our maps with warnings, restricted access, authorized personnel only. We're told these are munition storage facilities, classified equipment testing zones, things like that. Standard military operations security. Nothing unusual about that, right? Except these restricted zones take up way more land than any storage facility would need. We're talking thousands of acres deep in the wooded areas on the western edge of the base. And the security around these zones, it's excessive. I'm talking multiple fences, motion sensors, regular patrols by military police who don't wear standard unit patches. In my first 3 years at Campbell, I never questioned it. You'll learn pretty quickly in the Army not to ask questions about things above your pay grade. You do your job, follow orders, and mind your business. That changed last year when I got assigned to a night patrol rotation. Now, night patrols at Fort Campbell are routine. Despite what civilians might think, military bases aren't just locked down at night. We run 24-hour operations. Training happens around the clock. Security patrols are constant. My unit rotates through these patrols every few weeks. It's just part of the job. But this particular patrol assignment was different. It came down through our platoon sergeant on a Tuesday morning in September. He called me into his office, which was unusual. Normally, patrol assignments just get posted on the duty roster. You check the board, you see your name, you show up at the designated time. Simple. Instead, Sergeant Holloway wanted to see me personally. "Private First Class Marcus," he said, not looking up from his desk. "You're on a special patrol assignment tonight. 2200 hours, Gate 7. Gate 7? I'd never even heard of Gate 7. "Roger that, Sergeant," I replied. "What's the patrol route?" He slid a sealed envelope across his desk. "Everything you need is in here. You'll be briefed on site by the patrol leader. This is a solo assignment. You don't discuss this with anyone in your unit. Understood? Solo patrol. That raised immediate red flags. We never patrol alone. Never. It violates basic security protocols. 2-man minimum, usually 4-man teams for any patrol in the training areas. Sergeant, I'm not sure I understand. Solo patrol? Holloway finally looked up at me. His expression was unreadable, but I caught something in his eyes. Was it concern? Warning? Those are your orders, Private. 2200 hours, Gate 7. Don't be late. I took the envelope and left his office, my mind racing. Back in the barracks, I waited until I was alone before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with grid coordinates, a radio frequency, and a call sign, Watchdog 9. No patrol route, no mission objectives, just coordinates deep in the Western Restricted Zone and a radio frequency I'd never used before. The rest of that day dragged by. I went through my normal duties, physical training, equipment maintenance, administrative tasks, but my thoughts kept returning to that envelope. What kind of patrol was this? Why me? Why solo? I considered asking some of the other guys in my unit if they'd ever done anything like this, but Holloway's orders were clear. Don't discuss it with anyone. So I kept my mouth shut and waited for nightfall. At 2100 hours, I geared up. Standard combat load, rifle, 6 magazines, night vision goggles, radio, first aid kit, water, and emergency supplies. I signed out my equipment from the armory and headed to my vehicle. Gate 7 wasn't marked on any of the base maps I'd ever seen. I had to use my phone's GPS to find it, following a dirt road that branched off from one of the main supply routes on the western edge of the base. The road got narrower as I drove, trees pressing in on both sides, until I reached a checkpoint I'd never encountered before. 2 military police vehicles were parked at a gate that looked more like something you'd see at a maximum security prison than a military base. High fences topped with razor wire, floodlights, cameras on motorized mounts that tracked my vehicle as I approached. An MP walked up to my window. He wasn't wearing a name tape. No unit insignia either. Identification and orders, he said flatly. I handed him my military ID and the envelope from Sergeant Holloway. He took them back to his vehicle, spent several minutes on his radio, then returned. You're cleared. Proceed to the staging area, follow the road another 2 miles, you'll see the checkpoint. Your patrol leader is waiting. The gate rolled open, and I drove through. The road beyond was even rougher, barely maintained, winding through dense forest. My headlights caught glimpses of more fencing in the trees, more cameras, more infrastructure that had no business being this far out in what was supposed to be just training land. After 2 miles, I reached another checkpoint. This one was smaller, just a shelter with a single vehicle parked outside. A figure stood under the shelter's light, and as I pulled up, I recognized the rank insignia of a staff sergeant. But like the MPs at the gate, he wasn't wearing a name tape or unit patch. I parked and got out, approaching with my orders. Watchdog 9? The staff sergeant asked. Yes, Sergeant. He looked me over, assessing. You been briefed on the patrol parameters? No, Sergeant. I was told I'd get briefed on site. He nodded slowly, then pulled out a laminated map. Listen carefully, because I'm only going over this once. Your patrol sector is here. He pointed to a highlighted area on the map. Approximately 4 square miles of wooded terrain. You'll be conducting a foot patrol along this perimeter. His finger traced a route that formed a rough rectangle. The patrol should take approximately 4 hours at a steady pace. You maintain radio contact every 30 minutes. Call sign Watchdog 9, frequency already provided to you. Any questions so far? What am I looking for, Sergeant? His expression didn't change. Anomalies. Anomalies? Anything out of place. Anything that doesn't belong. Signs of unauthorized entry, disturbances, equipment malfunction. You report anything unusual immediately. Do not investigate on your own. Do not approach anything that seems out of place. You report it, mark the coordinates, and continue your patrol. Clear? Clear, Sergeant. He handed me the map. One more thing. If you hear the alert tone on your radio, 3 short bursts, you stop whatever you're doing and return to this checkpoint immediately. You don't ask questions, you don't delay, you get back here as fast as possible. Understood? Understood, Sergeant. Good. Your patrol starts now. Stay safe out there, Private. There was something in the way he said that last part, like it wasn't just the standard send-off, like he meant it as an actual warning. I shouldered my pack, checked my rifle, and headed into the darkness. The forest swallowed me within minutes. Make sure you're still with me, because this is where things start to get strange. Hit that like button if you're following along, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever heard anything unusual about Fort Campbell. Trust me, after you hear the rest of this story, you're gonna look at military bases very differently. The night vision goggles turned everything into shades of green and black. Trees became towering shadows. The underbrush glowed with that characteristic phosphorescent quality that makes the world look alien through NODs. I'd done plenty of night patrols before. The darkness doesn't bother me. I'm comfortable moving through wooded terrain, maintaining noise discipline, staying alert. This should have felt routine, but it didn't. Something was off from the moment I entered that tree line. The forest was too quiet. No crickets, no owls, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Just the sound of my own breathing and my boots crunching on fallen leaves. I checked my compass and started following the route the staff sergeant had marked. The perimeter patrol would take me in a large rectangle through this restricted sector, keeping me roughly half a mile from the inner fence line that I could occasionally glimpse through the trees. That inner fence was serious business. 20 feet tall, topped with razor wire and what looked like electric sensors. Every 100 yards or so, I'd spot another camera mounted on a pole, slowly rotating to cover the area. Whatever they were protecting in there, they really didn't want anyone getting close. 30 minutes into the patrol, I made my first radio check. Base, this is Watchdog 9. Radio check. Over. Static crackled in my earpiece for a few seconds before a voice responded. It wasn't the staff sergeant. This was a different voice. Flat, emotional, almost electronic. Watchdog 9. We read you, Llama Charlie. Continue patrol. Report any anomalies. Base out. Llama Charlie. Loud and clear. Standard radio communication. I continued walking, following my route, checking my map every few minutes to confirm my position. The forest remained unnaturally quiet. No wind, no animal sounds, just that heavy silence that makes your ears ring after a while. Then I noticed the trees. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks through the night vision, but as I moved deeper into the patrol sector, it became undeniable. Some of the trees were damaged, not from storms or natural causes. These were burn marks, scorch patterns that ran vertically up the trunks, like something had hit them with intense heat. I stopped at one particularly damaged oak tree. The bark was blackened and cracked, peeling away to reveal the pale wood underneath. The damage started about 4 feet off the ground and extended up at least 20 feet. Whatever had caused this had been powerful and directional. I pulled out my notepad and marked the location, anomaly number 1. As I continued the patrol, I found more damaged trees. They formed a pattern, a line that cut through the forest at an angle to my patrol route. I followed the line of damaged trees for about 50 yards, documenting each one, until I reached a small clearing. That's where I found the crater. It wasn't large, maybe 10 feet in diameter, but it was perfectly circular. The earth inside was compressed, packed down hard, like something heavy had pressed it flat. The vegetation around the edges was dead, withered to brown husks, and in the center of the crater, the dirt had a strange glassy quality, like it had been subjected to extreme heat. I knelt at the edge of the crater, careful not to step inside. This wasn't from any training exercise I knew about. We don't conduct operations that would create something like this. And even if we did, this was in a restricted zone where regular training didn't happen. I keyed my radio. Base, this is Watchdog 9. I have an anomaly to report. Over. The response came immediately, that same flat voice. Watchdog 9, send your report. I have what appears to be an impact crater, approximately 10 feet in diameter, with evidence of extreme heat exposure. Multiple trees in the vicinity show burn damage. Grid coordinates. I read off my position from my GPS unit. Silence on the other end. It stretched for almost a full minute. I was about to repeat my transmission when the voice finally responded. Watchdog 9, copy your report. Mark the location on your map. Do not approach closer than 10 meters. Continue your patrol. Base out. That was it. No questions about what I'd found, no request for additional details, just acknowledgement and orders to move on. I marked the crater on my map and continued along my route, but my mind was racing. What could create a crater like that? A munitions test? But there was no debris, no shrapnel, nothing that suggested an explosion, just that compressed earth and the heat damage. Another 30 minutes passed. I made my second radio check. Routine, nothing to report. The forest remained silent and still. My night vision was working perfectly, giving me clear views of the terrain ahead. That's when I noticed the lights. At first, I thought I was seeing reflections from my NODs, maybe some malfunction causing artifacts in my vision. But when I lifted the goggles to check with my naked eyes, the lights were still there. They were distant, maybe half a mile away, deeper in the restricted zone. Small points of light, blue-white in color, moving through the trees in formation. 3 of them, maintaining perfect spacing, gliding smoothly at what I estimated was about 15 feet off the ground. I froze, watching them move. They weren't helicopters, no sound, no rotors, no navigation lights. They weren't flashlights or vehicle headlights either. These were different. The light they emitted was cold, almost clinical, and it didn't seem to illuminate the surrounding area the way normal light sources would. I dropped to one knee behind a tree and continued observing. The lights moved in perfect synchronization, following a path parallel to the inner fence line. They maintained their formation for about 2 minutes, then suddenly stopped. All 3 lights hung motionless in the air. Then they began to pulse, slowly at first, dimming and brightening in a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. The pulsing increased in frequency, faster and faster, until the lights were strobing so rapidly they appeared almost solid. And then they vanished. Not gradually, not fading out. They just ceased to exist, like someone had flipped a switch. I stayed frozen behind that tree for a full minute, scanning the area where the lights had been, looking for any sign of them. Nothing. The forest had swallowed them completely. My hands were shaking as I reached for my radio. Base, this is Watchdog 9. I have another anomaly to report. Watchdog 9, send your report. I described what I'd seen, the lights, their movement, the pulsing, their sudden disappearance. I gave the approximate location and bearing from my position. This time, the silence that followed was even longer. I could hear faint static in my earpiece, maybe voices in the background, but nothing clear. Finally, Watchdog 9, copy your report. Continue your patrol. Maintain your route. Do not deviate toward the location of the lights. Acknowledge. I acknowledge. Continuing patrol. Watchdog 9 out. My heart was pounding now. Every instinct I had was telling me that something was very wrong with this patrol. Those lights weren't from any equipment I'd ever seen. The crater, the burned trees, now these lights. This wasn't normal base operations. But I had my orders. Continue the patrol. I checked my map. I was about halfway through the route, approaching the northern corner of my patrol sector. 2 more hours minimum to complete the circuit and get back to the checkpoint. I pushed forward, keeping my senses on high alert. The silence of the forest had taken on a menacing quality now. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every slight movement in my peripheral vision made me snap my rifle toward it. That's when I heard the sound. It started low, almost below the threshold of hearing. A humming, but not mechanical. It was organic somehow, pulsing with a rhythm that made my teeth ache. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, resonating through the trees, through the ground, through my chest. I stopped walking, trying to pinpoint the direction. The humming grew louder, building in intensity. My night vision started to flicker, the image breaking up into static and then clearing again. Then I saw it. Through the trees ahead, maybe 200 yards away, something was moving. Something big. At first, my brain tried to make sense of it, tried to fit it into categories I understood. A vehicle, a piece of equipment, a structure being moved. But it wasn't any of those things. It was tall, easily 30 feet, and it moved with an impossible fluidity. The shape was wrong, geometry that my mind struggled to process. It seemed to shift as it moved, like my eyes couldn't quite focus on it properly. One moment it appeared solid, the next it seemed translucent, almost ghost-like. And then they vanished. The humming intensified. My night vision goggles went completely dark. I ripped them off and relied on my natural night vision, but even without the NODs, I could see it. It was giving off its own faint luminescence, that same blue-white color as the lights I'd seen earlier. Every part of my training told me to report this immediately, to call it in and wait for instructions. But my hands wouldn't move. My body had locked up, some primal part of my brain overriding my military discipline with pure survival instinct. The thing stopped. It was about 100 yards away now, and even though I couldn't make out any distinct features, I had the overwhelming sensation that it was aware of me, that it was looking at me. The humming changed pitch, becoming higher, more intense. The sound drilled into my skull, making it hard to think. I felt pressure building in my head, behind my eyes. And then my radio crackled to life. 3 short bursts of tone. The abort signal. The thing seemed to react to the sound. It shifted, that impossible geometry rearranging itself, and then it began to move away, gliding through the trees with impossible speed. Within seconds, it had vanished into the darkness. The humming stopped. The pressure in my head released. My night vision goggles flickered back to life in my hands. I stood there, gasping for air I didn't realize I'd been holding, my entire body shaking with adrenaline. The radio crackled again, that flat voice, more urgent than before. Watchdog 9, acknowledge abort signal. Return to checkpoint immediately. Do not delay. Acknowledge. I grabbed my radio with trembling hands. Watchdog 9 acknowledges, returning to checkpoint. Double time at private, move now, base out. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and started running back along my patrol route, following my GPS back toward the checkpoint. I didn't care about noise discipline anymore. I didn't care about proper tactical movement. I just ran. The forest, which had been so quiet before, suddenly erupted with sound. Birds I hadn't heard all night burst from the trees, calling an alarm. Animals crashed through the underbrush. It was like every living thing in that forest had been holding its breath and suddenly released it all at once. I ran for 20 minutes straight, only slowing when I saw the lights of the checkpoint ahead through the trees. The staff sergeant was outside, standing next to his vehicle, watching me approach. I stumbled out of the tree line, breathing hard, my legs burning from the run. "You saw it," the staff sergeant said. Not a question, a statement. I nodded, unable to speak yet. He handed me a bottle of water. "Drink, catch your breath, then we need to talk." I drank the entire bottle of water in 3 long gulps. My hands had finally stopped shaking, but my heart was still racing. The staff sergeant watched me in silence, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the checkpoint. "How long have you been at Campbell?" he finally asked. "Since 2019, Sergeant." "And this is your first patrol in this sector?" "Yes, Sergeant." He nodded slowly. like this confirmed something he already knew. "Follow me." He led me into the checkpoint shelter. Inside was more equipment than I'd expected. Multiple computer monitors, radio equipment, surveillance screens showing various angles of the restricted zone. One entire wall was covered with a detailed map of the area, marked with colored pins and handwritten notes. The staff sergeant pulled out a metal folding chair and gestured for me to sit. He remained standing, arms crossed, studying me. "What I'm about to tell you is classified," he began. "You won't find any of this in official records. There's no paperwork, no documented briefings. If you repeat what I'm about to share with anyone outside of authorized personnel, you'll face consequences that will end your military career at minimum. Do you understand?" "I understand, Sergeant." "Good, because you're going to have questions, and I'm going to answer some of them. Not all of them. I don't have all the answers myself, but enough that you can process what you experienced tonight and continue doing your job." He pulled up a chair across from me and sat down. For the first time since I arrived, his rigid military bearing softened slightly. Fort Campbell sits on land that has a history most people don't know about. Before the military bought this territory in 1941, there were reports going back over 100 years. Native American tribes avoided certain areas here. Early settlers documented strange occurrences, lights in the sky, unexplained sounds, livestock disappearing. Local newspapers from the 1800s are filled with accounts that people dismissed as superstition or frontier tall tales. He paused, watching my reaction. The military didn't choose this location randomly. Yes, the terrain is good for training. Yes, the location is strategic. But there were other considerations, other reasons why they wanted control of this specific piece of land. "What kind of reasons?" I asked. "The same reasons you just ran back here looking like you'd seen a ghost. This area has activity, has had it for a long time. The military wanted to study it, control it, contain it. So they built a base here, and within that base, they created zones where they could monitor and investigate the phenomena without public interference." He stood and walked to the map on the wall, pointing to various marked locations. "We've documented over 300 incidents in the past 15 years alone. Sightings, encounters, equipment malfunctions, temporal anomalies, gravitational distortions. Most of them happen in this western sector, which is why it's so heavily restricted, but they've occurred across the entire installation at various times." "What causes them?" I asked. "What are they?" The staff sergeant turned back to me. "That's the question nobody can answer definitively. We have theories, multiple competing theories actually. Some believe it's extraterrestrial, that something is monitoring or using this location for purposes we don't understand. Others think it's interdimensional, that there are thin spots here where our reality intersects with something else. There's a faction that insists it's time-related, that we're seeing glimpses of other time periods or experiencing temporal echoes." He returned to his chair and leaned forward. "But here's what we know for certain. Whatever it is, it's intelligent. It responds to human presence. It seems to study us as much as we study it. And it's been increasing in frequency over the past 5 years. I thought about the thing I'd seen moving through the trees, that impossible geometry, that sense of being observed. How many people know about this?" I asked. "On this base, maybe 200 personnel across all ranks and units. Most are in intelligence, research, or specialized security roles. Then there are people like you, regular soldiers who get pulled into patrol rotations when we need extra coverage. We use enlisted personnel for ground patrols because officers attract too much attention. A private or specialist going on a night patrol doesn't raise questions. A captain or major doing the same thing gets noticed." "Why me specifically?" The staff sergeant smiled grimly. "Your psychological evaluation scores, clean record, high marks for composure under stress, no history of panic or irrational behavior. You're also relatively new to the base, which means you haven't formed strong social connections that would make your absence from normal duties suspicious. He stood again and checked one of the computer monitors. The crater you found tonight is new. Wasn't there during the last patrol 72 hours ago. The burn damage on the trees matches patterns we've seen before, usually associated with the light phenomena you observed. And the entity you encountered, we call them visitors, for lack of a better term. That was a Type 3 manifestation. Type 3, we categorize the encounters. Type 1 is lights only, no physical form, just luminous phenomena. Type 2 involves physical effects on the environment, electromagnetic disturbances, equipment failure, temporal distortion, that kind of thing. Type 3 is what you saw, an actual, visible entity with apparent physical presence. Those are rare. We get maybe 3 or 4 Type 3 encounters per year. The staff sergeant pulled out a file folder from a locked drawer and set it on the table between us. This contains incident reports from the past 18 months. You'll be given limited access to review these. You need to understand that what you experienced tonight wasn't unique. Other soldiers have seen similar things. Some have seen much worse. Worse? The word came out before I could stop it. His expression darkened. 3 years ago, we had a 2-man patrol that didn't come back. We found them 6 hours later, 2 miles from their last known position, both unconscious. When they woke up in the medical facility, they had no memory of those 6 hours. But they'd aged, not dramatically, but measurably. Blood tests, bone density scans, cellular analysis, everything indicated they'd aged approximately 3 years in those 6 hours. He let that sink in. One of them requested discharge shortly after. The other is still here, works in one of the research facilities. He won't talk about what happened, even under direct orders. Whatever he remembers or doesn't remember, it changed him fundamentally. I thought about my own encounter, about that humming sound and the pressure in my head. Had something been trying to communicate, or was it doing something else? What do they want? I asked. The visitors, what's their purpose? If we knew that, Private, this would be a very different conversation. We don't know. They don't communicate in any way we can understand. They don't respond to our attempts at contact. They just appear, they observe, or interact in ways we can't predict, and then they leave. Sometimes weeks go by with no activity. Sometimes we get multiple encounters in a single night. He closed the file folder. Here's what happens next. You're going to go back to your barracks tonight. Tomorrow, you'll report to Building 6847 at 900 hours for a debriefing. You'll provide a detailed account of everything you experienced. You'll undergo a medical evaluation, standard procedure after a Type 3 encounter, and then you'll be placed on the rotation list for future patrols in this sector. Future patrols? My voice came out higher than I intended. You've been read into the program now, Private. You're one of the few people on this base who knows what's really happening in these restricted zones. That makes you valuable. You'll continue your normal duties with your unit, but every few weeks, you'll get assigned to night patrols here. You'll observe, you'll report, and you'll help us gather data on these phenomena. He stood, indicating the conversation was over. One more thing. You're going to be tempted to research this online, to look for similar reports, or try to find explanations. Don't. Everything you need to know will be provided through official channels. Internet searches create digital footprints that attract the wrong kind of attention. There are people, civilians and military, who actively monitor for this kind of information. You start digging, and you'll end up in a room answering very uncomfortable questions from people who make me look friendly. I stood as well, my legs still weak from the adrenaline crash. Do you have any questions? He asked. I had about 1,000 questions, but my mind was too overwhelmed to articulate them clearly. I settled on the most important one. Am I in danger? Are the other soldiers on this base in danger? The staff sergeant considered this carefully before answering. In the 15 years this program has been active, we've had no fatalities directly attributed to the phenomena. We've had injuries, mostly psychological, some physical. We've had equipment failures that could have resulted in deaths but didn't. Whatever these things are, they don't seem actively hostile, but they're not safe either. They're unpredictable, alien. Every encounter carries risk. He walked me to the door. Get some rest, Private. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. And welcome to the program. For better or worse, your service at Fort Campbell just became a lot more interesting. I drove back through the checkpoints, through the gates, back to the normal sections of the base. The familiar sounds of the installation, distant helicopters, vehicle engines, the hum of generators, felt surreal after the silence of that restricted zone. Back in my barracks, I lay in my bunk and stared at the ceiling. My roommate was already asleep, snoring softly. Around me, 24 other soldiers slept peacefully, completely unaware that a few miles away, something impossible was moving through the forest. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing moving through the trees, that impossible shape, that sense of being observed by something utterly alien. And I knew with absolute certainty that my life had changed forever. I showed up at building 6847 at 0850 hours, 10 minutes early. The building was nondescript, a single-story concrete structure on the eastern side of the base, away from the main administrative areas. No signs indicating what department occupied it, no unit insignia on the door, just a number and a card reader for access. I stood outside for several minutes before a civilian woman in her 40s emerged and held the door open for me. "Private First Class Marcus?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Follow me, please." The interior was clinical. White walls, fluorescent lighting, sealed doors along a central corridor. She led me to a room at the end of the hall. No windows, just a table, 4 chairs, and recording equipment mounted in the corners. "Have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." She left, and I sat alone in that room for 20 minutes. Long enough to make me uncomfortable, long enough to make me wonder if this was part of some psychological evaluation. Finally, the door opened and 2 people entered. The first was a man in his 50s wearing an Army colonel's uniform, no name tape, just rank insignia. The second was a younger man in civilian clothes carrying a laptop and file folders. "Private Marcus," the colonel said, taking a seat across from me. "I'm Colonel Davies. This is Dr. Mitchell. He's with the Defense Intelligence Agency. We're here to discuss your patrol last night." Dr. Mitchell set up his laptop and opened one of the folders. His expression was completely neutral, analytical. He reminded me of the scientists I'd seen in the research labs during basic training exercises. "Let's start from the beginning," Colonel Davies said. "Take us through the entire patrol, from the moment you entered the restricted zone until you returned to the checkpoint. Don't leave anything out, no matter how insignificant it seems." For the next 2 hours, I recounted everything. The silence of the forest, the crater and burned trees, the lights moving through the trees, the humming sound, the entity that moved toward me before the abort signal came through. Dr. Mitchell took notes constantly, occasionally stopping me to ask for clarifications. How tall exactly did I estimate the entity to be? What was the frequency of the humming? Low, middle, high range? Did I experience any physical symptoms besides the pressure in my head? Did time seem to pass normally, or did I notice any distortions? Some of his questions I could answer, others I couldn't. The experience had been so overwhelming, so far outside my frame of reference, that precise details were hard to recall. "Let's talk about the moment when the entity stopped and appeared to observe you," Dr. Mitchell said, leaning forward. "You said you had the sensation of being looked at. Can you elaborate on that?" "It wasn't visual," I said, struggling to find the right words. "I mean, I couldn't see eyes or anything that looked like sensory organs. It was more like awareness, like when you can feel someone staring at you from across a room, except amplified. I knew with absolute certainty that it was focused on me." "Did you receive any impressions, thoughts that weren't your own, images, emotions?" I thought back to that moment. Fear, but I think that was my own reaction. There was something else, though. Curiosity, maybe? Like it was trying to understand me as much as I was trying to understand it. Dr. Mitchell made notes. Did you experience any missing time? Any gaps in your awareness between when you saw the entity and when you heard the abort signal? No, everything felt continuous. Colonel Davis spoke up. The staff sergeant at the checkpoint informed you about the classification level of what you witnessed. Do you understand the seriousness of that classification? Yes, sir. Good, because moving forward, you're part of a very small group of people who have direct knowledge of these phenomena. That comes with responsibilities. You'll be required to attend monthly briefings. You'll have limited access to incident reports and research data. And you'll participate in additional patrols as needed. He slid a document across the table. This is a non-disclosure agreement. Read it carefully. Once you sign it, you're legally bound to secrecy. Violation carries serious consequences. Court-martial, federal prosecution, imprisonment. Do you understand? I read through the document. It was dense legal language, but the message was clear. Speak about any of this to unauthorized personnel and my life would be destroyed. I signed it. Now, Colonel Davis continued, let's discuss the medical evaluation. Dr. Mitchell will conduct a series of tests, blood work, neurological assessment, psychological evaluation. This is standard procedure after a Type 3 encounter. We need to establish a baseline and check for any physiological changes. Changes? That word made my stomach tighten. Dr. Mitchell spoke in his calm, analytical tone. In some cases, close proximity to the phenomena has resulted in measurable alterations, usually temporary. Changes in brain activity patterns, elevated cortisol levels, disrupted circadian rhythms. Nothing permanent in most cases, but we need to monitor. In most cases, there have been 3 documented instances of lasting effects over the past decade. One individual experienced persistent lucid dreaming and enhanced pattern recognition abilities. Another developed a sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. The third, he paused, choosing his words carefully, required extended psychiatric care. That was reassuring. The medical evaluation took another 3 hours. Blood draws, brain scans, physical examinations, and a lengthy psychological questionnaire that asked the same questions in different ways, clearly designed to detect inconsistencies or signs of mental instability. By 1500 hours, they finally released me with instructions to report back in 1 week for follow-up testing. I returned to my normal duties, but nothing felt normal anymore. I went through the motions, physical training, weapons maintenance, administrative tasks, but my mind was elsewhere. Every night I lay awake thinking about what I'd seen. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Every unusual sound made me hyper-alert. 3 weeks later, I got my next patrol assignment. This time, there was no mysterious envelope, no solo briefing from my platoon sergeant. The assignment came through official channels, or at least channels that looked official. I received a text message to my personal phone from an unknown number. Patrol assignment, 2200 hours, Gate 7, acknowledge. I replied with a simple, acknowledged, and prepared for another night in the restricted zone. The patrol followed the same basic format. Check in at Gate 7, receive briefing from a staff sergeant, a different one this time, and head into the forest with orders to observe and report anomalies. But this patrol was different from the start. The forest wasn't silent this time. I could hear normal night sounds, crickets, distant owls, wind moving through the branches. It felt like a regular night patrol, the kind I'd done dozens of times in training areas across the base. I followed my assigned route, making radio checks every 30 minutes, documenting my position and observations. 2 hours passed without incident. I was beginning to think this would be an uneventful patrol when I noticed something strange about my compass. The needle was spinning, not wildly, but in a slow, continuous rotation, never settling on north, just turning, turning, turning. I stopped walking and pulled out my GPS unit. The screen was glitching, showing my position jumping between locations hundreds of yards apart. My elevation reading kept changing, one moment showing I was at ground level, the next indicating I was 300 feet in the air. I keyed my radio. "Base, this is Watchdog 9. I'm experiencing equipment malfunction. Compass and GPS are both malfunctioning. Requesting guidance, over." The response came immediately. "Watchdog 9, copy your malfunction report. Maintain your current position. Do not attempt to navigate until equipment stabilizes. We're tracking your position. Stand by." I knelt behind a tree, keeping my rifle ready, watching the surrounding forest. My night vision goggles were still working properly, giving me clear views in all directions. That's when I noticed the ground. The leaves and pine needles covering the forest floor were moving. Not from wind, there was no wind. They were moving upward, slowly rising into the air like they were floating on water. Individual leaves drifted past my face, spiraling gently upward into the canopy. I looked up and saw them continuing to rise, up through the branches, disappearing into the darkness above. Then I felt it, a lightness in my body. My gear felt less heavy. My boots seemed to barely touch the ground. The gravity was changing. I pressed myself against the tree, wrapping my arm around it to anchor myself. The sensation increased, that floating feeling, like being underwater. My rifle strap loosened as the weapon tried to drift away from my body. I grabbed it and held it tight against my chest. Around me, larger objects began to lift. Fallen branches, rocks, a dead log that must have weighed 100 pounds drifted past me at head height, rotating slowly as it rose. My radio crackled. "Watchdog 9, we're detecting anomalous readings in your sector. Confirm you are secure." My voice came out strained. "I'm holding position, experiencing gravitational distortion. Objects are floating. I'm anchored to a tree." "Copy that. Hold your position. Do not let go. The effects should pass within 2 to 3 minutes." 2 to 3 minutes? I could do that. Except the sensation kept increasing. I could feel my feet lifting off the ground. Only my grip on the tree kept me from floating away. My heart was racing, adrenaline flooding my system. What if I lost my grip? How high would I go before the effect ended? Then I saw them. Lights. Multiple lights, at least a dozen, appearing in the air around me. They weren't like the organized lights I'd seen on my first patrol. These were chaotic, swirling in complex patterns, weaving between the floating debris. And they were coming closer. One passed within arm's reach. I could see it clearly, a spear of blue-white luminescence about the size of a baseball, moving with apparent purpose. As it passed, I felt a tingling sensation across my skin, like static electricity. More lights converged on my position, circling the tree I was clinging to. They moved in synchronized patterns, creating geometric shapes in the air. Triangles, squares, more complex forms that hurt to look at. The gravitational effect was weakening. I could feel my weight returning. The floating debris began to descend. The lights pulsed brighter, their movements becoming more frantic. And then, just like before, they vanished. Everything dropped. Branches crashed down. The log that had floated past me slammed into the ground 20 feet away. My feet hit the earth hard enough to jar my knees. The forest returned to normal. My compass needle stopped spinning and pointed north. My GPS unit displayed a stable reading. My equipment bag felt its normal weight. The radio. "Watchdog 9, readings are normalizing. Report your status." I'm okay. Equipment is functional. The effect has passed." "Copy. Continue your patrol. Mark the location of the event." Continue the patrol, just like that, like I hadn't just experienced something that defied the fundamental laws of physics. But I did. I marked the location, took compass bearings, documented everything in my notepad, and I continued walking my route, completing the patrol as ordered. When I returned to the checkpoint, a different staff sergeant was waiting. A woman this time, also without name tape or unit insignia. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Shaken, but functional." She nodded. The gravitational anomalies are unpredictable. We've documented 17 separate incidents over the past 3 years. They seem to be localized, temporary, and not directly harmful, but they're getting more frequent. What causes them? She shrugged. Your guess is as good as mine. Dr. Mitchell has theories about space-time distortions, about the phenomena manipulating local fields, but theories don't mean much when you're watching rocks float past your head. She handed me a bottle of water. Debrief is tomorrow, same time, same building. Get some rest. And private, you did good out there. A lot of soldiers panic when the gravity goes sideways. You kept your head. I drove back to the barracks, but I didn't sleep. Again. Over the next 6 months, I did 11 more patrols in the restricted zones. Each one brought something new, something impossible. On Patrol 4, I watched my shadow move independently of my body, walking several steps ahead of me before snapping back to its proper position. On Patrol 7, I encountered an area where sound didn't work correctly. My footsteps made no noise, my voice disappeared the moment words left my mouth. But I could hear other sounds, whispers in languages I didn't recognize, coming from empty air. On Patrol 9, I found a section of forest where all the trees were dead, bark stripped away, wood turned to a crystalline structure that reflected light like glass. The area formed a perfect circle, 50 feet in diameter. No explanation, no prior reports of anything similar. Each patrol, each encounter, each impossible thing I witnessed chipped away at my understanding of reality. The debriefings became routine. The medical evaluations continued monthly. My blood work showed elevated stress hormones, but nothing alarming. My neurological scans revealed increased activity in certain brain regions associated with pattern recognition and threat assessment. Dr. Mitchell said it was an adaptation, my brain rewiring itself to process experiences that shouldn't be possible. I learned to live with it. The nightmares, the hypervigilance, the constant awareness that reality wasn't as stable as everyone believed. And I learned something else. I wasn't alone. It happened during my 13th patrol, 7 months after my first encounter. I was following my standard route through the western sector when my radio crackled with a transmission that wasn't from base. Watchdog 9, this is Shepherd 4. I'm approximately 200 meters southeast of your position. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? I froze. Another patrol? They'd never mentioned multiple patrols running simultaneously. Shepherd 4, this is Watchdog 9. I'm not sure what you're referring to. What's your visual? The structure, grid coordinates. He rattled off a position about 300 meters ahead of my current location. Structure? There were no structures in this sector, just forest and the occasional equipment shed. Shepherd 4, I'm not tracking any structure on my map. Describe what you're seeing. A pause. Then, it's big, maybe 40 feet tall. Metallic, but not like any metal I've seen. It's reflecting light that isn't there. And it's humming. Same sound as the Type 3 encounters. You need to see this. Every protocol I'd been taught said I should radio base, report the contact with another patrol, get authorization before deviating from my route. But something in the other soldier's voice, a mixture of awe and urgency, made me change course. I moved southeast, using my GPS to navigate toward the coordinates he'd provided. As I got closer, I began to hear it. That humming, the same sound from my first patrol, resonating through the trees, making my teeth ache. I emerged into a clearing and stopped dead. The other soldier was there, a specialist based on his rank insignia, African-American, early 20s, standing at the edge of the clearing with his rifle lowered, staring at what stood in the center. It was a structure, just as he'd described, but calling it a structure felt inadequate. It was a geometric impossibility. Angles that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space, surfaces that seemed to curve inward and outward simultaneously. The material looked like brushed steel, but it moved like liquid, rippling and flowing while maintaining its overall shape. And it was definitely humming. The sound emanated from it in waves, creating visible distortions in the air. "How long has this been here?" I asked, approaching the specialist. He jumped, startled by my voice, despite knowing I was coming. "I've been watching it for about 10 minutes. It wasn't here on my last patrol 3 weeks ago, I'm certain. I walked through this exact clearing. We stood side by side, two soldiers staring at something that couldn't exist. "Should we call it in?" he asked. Before I could answer, the structure changed. The humming intensified. The surface began to shift more rapidly, geometric patterns flowing across it like water. And then a section of it, I can't describe it better than this, opened. Not like a door opening, more like reality unfolding, creating an aperture that led somewhere else. Through the opening, I could see light. Not the cold blue-white light of the phenomena, but warm, golden light. And beyond that light, shapes, structures, a landscape that definitely wasn't Kentucky forest. "Are you seeing this?" The specialist's voice was barely a whisper. "Yeah, I'm seeing it." We watched as something moved in that opening. A shadow, humanoid in shape, but wrong in proportion. Too tall, limbs that bent at joints that shouldn't exist. The shadow paused in the opening, and once again, I felt that sensation of being observed, being studied. Then it stepped back, disappearing into that golden light. The opening began to close, reality folding back on itself. In 30 seconds, it was gone. The structure remained, but the aperture had sealed completely. My radio erupted with both our call signs. "Watchdog 9, Shepherd 4, report your status immediately." The specialist and I looked at each other. Without speaking, we both understood. Base knew we'd made contact with each other. They were tracking us. I keyed my radio. "Watchdog 9 and Shepherd 4 have rendezvoused at grid coordinates," I read off our position. "We have a Type 4 anomaly to report. Unknown structure, approximately 40 feet in height, metallic composition. Witnessed an aperture opening with visual contact of another location or dimension. Possible entity observed." Silence on the other end. It stretched for almost 2 minutes. Finally, "Both units, maintain your position. Do not approach the structure. Do not attempt any interaction. Extraction team is en route. ETA 15 minutes. We waited, keeping our distance from the structure, which continued its quiet humming and its impossible flowing movement. "I'm James," the specialist said quietly. "Been on these patrols for 8 months. This is the wildest thing I've seen yet." "Marcus, 7 months. Same here." "You ever wonder what they're doing? Like, what's the actual purpose of all this?" I'd wondered that constantly. Every patrol, every encounter, every impossible phenomenon, it all had to mean something, had to be building towards something. "I think they're studying us," I said, "or maybe preparing us for something. Why else bring soldiers out here, expose us to this stuff, document our reactions?" James nodded slowly. "I've thought the same thing. There are at least 20 of us in the program, maybe more. They're selecting for specific traits, specific responses. It's like we're being trained. Trained for what?" Before he could answer, we heard vehicles approaching. 4 Humvees rolled into the clearing, headlights illuminating the structure. Personnel poured out, mix of military and civilians, all wearing protective gear. They set up a perimeter, deployed scanning equipment, began taking measurements and samples. Colonel Davies emerged from one of the vehicles and walked directly to us. "You two, with me." He led us away from the clearing, far enough that we could speak without the other personnel hearing. "What you'll witness tonight represents a significant development," he said. "We've documented structures before, but never one that displayed an active portal or doorway. Never one that showed clear evidence of another location beyond it." "Sir," James spoke up, "what is this program really about? What are we preparing for?" Colonel Davies looked between us, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Officially, we're studying naturally occurring phenomena, documenting anomalies, gathering scientific data. That's what the reports say. That's what the funding proposals claim." He paused. "Unofficially, we're making contact, or rather, something is making contact with us, and it's been accelerating. 5 years ago, we had maybe 1 significant incident per month. Now, we're seeing multiple events per week. The phenomena are becoming more complex, more interactive. And we need personnel who can handle exposure without psychological breakdown, people who can adapt to impossibility and still function. Why soldiers? I asked. Why not scientists, specialists? Because scientists ask too many questions. They want to understand before they act. Soldiers are trained to adapt and execute. You see something impossible, you process it, you report it, you continue the mission. That's what we need. He looked back at the structure being studied by the research team. Something is coming. We don't know what, we don't know when. But these phenomena, they're not random. They're deliberate, calculated. Someone or something is testing us, preparing us, or possibly warning us. And when whatever is coming finally arrives, we need people who've already seen the impossible, people who won't freeze or panic when reality breaks down around them. The weight of his words settled over us. You're both being reassigned, he continued. Not off the base, but to a different unit. Official designation is Research Security Detail. You'll maintain your normal unit assignments as cover, but your primary duty will be these patrols and responding to incidents as they occur. You'll receive additional training in equipment operation, documentation protocols, and emergency procedures, and you'll have contact with the other personnel in the program. How many are there? James asked. On this base, 23, including you two. Globally, across other installations with similar phenomena, over 300. Fort Campbell isn't the only location experiencing this activity. We have hot zones at 17 installations worldwide, but Campbell is the most active. Whatever is happening here is more intense, more frequent than anywhere else. He handed us each a small device, about the size of a pager. Communication device, encrypted channel, links you directly to program command and to each other. If something significant happens, anywhere on this base, you'll be notified. Response time is critical. Some events only last minutes. We took the devices, clipping them to our belts. Get some rest, Colonel Davy said. Tomorrow you start the advanced training. And gentlemen, welcome to the real mission. Everything up until now was just the screening process. Over the next 3 months, everything changed. I met the other 21 soldiers in the program. We trained together, comparing experiences, sharing what we'd learned. Each person had their own encounters, their own impossible stories. Together, we began to see patterns. The phenomena appeared in cycles, periods of intense activity followed by quieter intervals. The cycles were getting shorter, more frequent activity, less downtime between events. The entities we encountered seemed to be evolving their interactions. Early reports from years ago described distant observations. Recent encounters showed increasingly direct contact. And the structures, like the one James and I had found, were appearing more frequently. 3 more materialized in different sectors over those 3 months. Each one slightly different in design, but all displaying similar properties. Impossible geometry, reality warping effects, occasional apertures showing other locations. Dr. Mitchell's team made breakthroughs in their research. They developed equipment that could detect the phenomena before they fully manifested. Early warning systems that gave us minutes, sometimes hours, to prepare and position observers. They also made a disturbing discovery. The phenomena were responding to human consciousness, not just presence, but awareness. The more people who knew about the events, the more frequent and intense they became. It was as if the act of observation strengthened the connection between our reality and whatever existed on the other side. We're creating a feedback loop, Dr. Mitchell explained during one of our briefings. Human awareness of the phenomena increases their manifestation rate, which increases human awareness, which increases manifestation. We're caught in a spiral that's accelerating beyond our ability to control it. So what do? Someone asked. We prepare, because ready or not, something is coming through, and when it does, we need to be able to respond. That was 4 weeks ago. Since then, the activity has exploded. Multiple events per day, structures appearing and disappearing, entities making increasingly prolonged appearances, gravitational anomalies, temporal distortions. Reality itself seems to be breaking down in the restricted zones. 3 nights ago, during my most recent patrol, I witnessed something that confirmed all my worst fears. I found a gathering. Dozens of entities, all Type 3 manifestations, assembled in a clearing deep in the western sector. They stood in formation, perfect geometric arrangement, all facing the same direction, toward the base, toward the populated areas where thousands of soldiers live and work. And as I watched from concealment, they began to move. Not randomly, not with the purposeless drifting I'd seen before. They moved with coordination, with purpose, with military precision. They're organizing. I reported it immediately. Command confirmed similar gatherings at 3 other locations on the base. Over 100 entities, all showing the same coordinated behavior. The order came down yesterday. Full base lockdown, all non-essential personnel confined to quarters, all training operations suspended. Every soldier in the program mobilized to observation posts around the restricted zones. Something is happening, something big, and we're about to find out what 7 months of impossible encounters have been preparing us for. I'm recording this from my observation post, overlooking the western restricted zone. It's 0300 hours. The forest below me is lit up with dozens of those blue-white lights, moving in complex patterns that suggest communication or preparation. The humming is constant now, so loud we can hear it in the populated sections of the base. Soldiers who aren't in the program are starting to notice, starting to ask questions. Command is running out of cover stories. Whatever is coming, it's coming soon. I don't know if I'll be able to update you again. I don't know what tomorrow brings. But I needed to tell this story, needed people outside Fort Campbell to know what's happening here. If something goes wrong, if communication from this base suddenly stops, if you hear reports of unusual activity or emergency lockdowns at Fort Campbell, you'll know why. We're not alone. We've never been alone. And whatever has been watching us, studying us, preparing us, it's almost ready to reveal itself. Stay vigilant. Pay attention to the news. And if you see lights in the sky moving in ways that don't make sense, if you experience things that shouldn't be possible, if reality starts bending around you, remember that you're not crazy. You're just seeing what's really there, what's always been there, waiting. If this video helped you understand what's really happening at military installations across the country, smash that subscribe button. Share this with people who need to know the truth. And keep watching the skies, because what's happening at Fort Campbell is just the beginning. Leave a comment telling me if you've experienced anything similar anywhere in the world. We need to know how widespread this really is.